Hi, it's Louise here answering question 7. That is, looking back at your preliminary task, what do you feel you have learnt in the progression from it to the full product? After looking back at my preliminary task, it's very clear that I have made significant improvements over the progression of my opening production. When I initially created this task, I used a normal phone camera for shooting, Serif and also apps on my phone to create the effects that I did to create a basic film production. This is quite clearly a large learning development curve for me because I have now learnt to use professional cameras as well as editing processes such as Premiere Pro. The elements we improved significantly on were sound, so regarding our knowledge of what we would get the audience on edge for, and also how to edit effectively. Camera was also a significant element of improvement. Our research after the preliminary task allowed us to choose and use the most effective shots for the atmosphere we wanted to create. And over time, with added research and practice with the cameras, we could use them at our best ability for our horror opening theme to be clear to the audience. Finally, editing was another large development that we made using Premiere Pro, and it had developed our knowledge further, and it got me to think of a variety of ways that I could edit for effect using a variety of professional appliances on the Premiere Pro workspace. So going into our initial progression stages, we created a short horror sequence involving the top 10 horror shots. We learned that these shots were essential for creating the correct horror tone and atmosphere, and this allowed me to progress during the production, filming and editing stages of our opening. I found that this was mainly because the task was a lot more relatable to the horror genre, and it actually allowed me to develop skills such as camera to effectively draw in the target audience I was aiming for. Some of the camera shots and angles we used was the 360 isolation shot to show isolation and vulnerability, the close-up shot of the victim to show extreme fear, and we also made use of high and low angles, so the low angles to show superiority of the villain, as well as high angles to show vulnerability of the victim, etc, etc. As previously mentioned, this developed my technique because we could choose which shots we wanted to use or not, making it quite effective on our main task. It was quite challenging creating this task because we were not completely familiar with all of the shots, so we had to learn and practice as we went along. This allowed us to adapt into the horror production style that therefore helped us to create our horror opening overall. So after looking back at the preliminary task, I found that regarding sound, there was a few weaknesses. We had sound bridges, but they didn't work regarding timing. We used too much of a variety of music, and we found that this wasn't effective in the end. So as we developed and adapted our knowledge, we changed this around a little bit. We also found that non-diegetic sound often overpowered diegetic sounds a lot, but now we know the importance of silence in horror to build up tension other than just dramatic scenes. Continually, we didn't have much knowledge or experience of the horror genre or any of the shots or the sound, so it wasn't perfect for atmosphere that we were looking for, so we felt that at the start it just didn't really work, it was too dramatic. Another progression was editing, and originally we used Serif and phone apps such as Splice to create our short task. Initially the apps were very basic sort of processing units, so it wasn't very effective when the quality came out, and it didn't give us much variety of transition and effects for our tasks, so it was very basic editing. We was also limited in what we could do regarding this, and we couldn't get the best possible transition effects that we could have wanted to at the start. We also used Adobe After Effects to create our logos and titles for our institutions, which we found was really effective at making the film seem professional and to also set the scene. This process has got us to develop skills in editing text, colours and green screens. An example of this is the blood dripping effect that we use for our institution logo. For our preliminary task, we had simple transitions of words with flashes of text that had no real significant impact on the audience. We have definitely improved significantly on this aspect. Photoshop was also used to edit photos and text for titles and the opening image within our opening. It was quite complicated at the beginning, however it developed and challenged us to find different ways of editing for a variety of desired effects and atmospheres. We also used Flash for the text element, which we used for movement and effects on the actual text itself, so when it flashed and moved a bit. Finally, Premiere Pro was my largest development in learning. It challenged me significantly because it was a professional working space that took a while to get used to. It was a large jump from Serif, but it allowed me to learn a lot about editing significantly. For example, from the progression of the prelim task, I learned how to use sound layers and music for effect. This was rather than using music all the way through, making use of other effects in particular places, and also giving my media product a professional finish, which it did not have before due to bad quality. I also learnt a lot about transition. Before, they were very basic because of the limited things that we had and the lack of knowledge that we had on how effective they would be. But now we have a wide range of knowledge and we know how to effectively put them in place to set the atmosphere perfectly. This clearly shows my progression and learning stages up until my final product. Thank you for watching. Bye.